Okay. Good morning. My name is Robin Park, Hearing Officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise is the clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterwards through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual meeting, there's no sign-in sheet, so if you would like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is held to consider 5 items. Sorry about that. It will be 1201 Market Street, 1580 Burke Avenue, 3633 24th Street, 445 Ortega Street, and 66 Mountain Spring Avenue. Will be in that order. My job as a hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director will make final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the Department will notify you of them if you have provided contact information. The hearing will proceed as I listed before. I will ask the Public Works staff to present them. The first one is 1201 Market Street.
Should I proceed with the first case?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get my screen shared.
Excuse me, before we proceed, should we begin with item number 2, the public comment, please?
Yeah, good
Ms.
point.
Park, thank you.
Yes, sorry about that, yes. Public comments. I actually didn't realize it. Okay.
So we have Mr. Clip. Mr. Clip, go ahead. He had his hand up.
Thanks. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Clip.
Yeah, I just want to point out that up until maybe about 1 minute before the meeting started, the Zoom link that's listed on the on the agenda and on the Public Works official listing was providing the error message of invalid. And there were several members of the public that were trying to click through, and I know because they were emailing me personally. And so I don't know how many people have just gave up because they were receiving that message. But I think that is procedurally problematic for this meeting. I think it's also problematic that with a hearing that is so visually driven, that we've got a hearing officer who can't actually see any of the presentations that are going to be given today, and yet is the person charged with making decisions on these agenda items. So that's my comment.
Mr. Clip, my apologies. I actually can see the presentations clearly. I just can't share my video to show you that show you on the video, which I had meant to, but I'm having an issue with my laptop.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And also Mr. Clip, I did also send out an emergency email to everyone, all the participants, applicants, protesters, and everyone, also letting them know of the, that we were waiting for clearance from Zoom to resume. So that email did go out as well. And you were also copied.
Hello.
Okay, so now we have Mr. Nolte. Go ahead.
Yes, I had the same problem. I had people calling me, telling me that the links didn't work. I hit the link 3 times, and then I also called the phone number, both the phone number and the links weren't working. So I would say that since we were already 15 minutes into this meeting should be redone and not start at all because participants weren't able to get here on a timely manner to start this meeting. So I would consider this a de facto meeting because not enough people were, because I know there are people that were calling me and also trying to get online. So, and I tried myself too. So I would say that this meeting should be redone and not heard today because of the technical difficulties with Zoom. And that is in itself a no-brainer. And I'm not in my inbox, even though I'm protesting to several items here. So I don't appreciate the last minute scrambling to get the Zoom to work, but unfortunately, I've been trying for over 15 minutes to get online and also get this get into this hearing. So and I had people calling me to trying to get online. So I feel that this hearing should be redone. And this hearing should not go forward today. Thank you.
Okay, we have Michael, the other Mr. Nolte.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me. I would just suggest, can the host tell us how many people are currently online before we proceed? And if all the people that she claims she emailed they actually come online. I think that's one way of looking at this, but I agree with if there's a problem with people coming onto the Zoom call, then they may not actually be here. Thank you.
Okay, so at present, we have 20 participants in the public arena, and we have 4, myself, Cerise, Steve, and the hearing officer, Ms. Park, as the 4 from Public Works. And we have 20 other attendees from the public.
This is Robin. I'm not sure what best thing, what is the protocol to do it in this case. Can you tell who the 20 participants are?
I can.
Related to, okay.
Yes, I can tell, and I'm looking to see that we do have a representative from each one of the cases. And if we do, I think we should go ahead and proceed. I'm going to verify and look at my email right now, but as of now, I do have representatives from Market Street, Ortega Street, Burke Street, and 24th Street. The only one I need to verify is Mountain Springs. So I will look at my email and get right back to you. But again, I see the participants from all of those cases present.
Okay.
We also have Roy. Roy has his hand up, so go ahead, Roy.
Roy, you're muted.
Hi, I'm here related to 3 of the cases, 1201 Market, 445 Ortega, and 66 Mountain Spring. And also, just as a matter of record, I succeeded in getting connected via Zoom at 10:01 today.
Thank you, Roy. Let's give Cerise a few more minutes and then.
Yes, I mean, I've looked and again, everybody that I see is connected. And if Mr. Leggett is representing Mountain Spring, then I think we should go ahead and proceed.
Yes, let's go ahead and proceed. Okay, so anybody else from the public that wants to comment? Okay, Steve, you could start the
Um,
presentation.
Can everyone see my screen?
There was another hand. I'm sorry, just a
Yeah,
moment.
we do have two other.
We have another hand. Yes.
So Marie, go ahead. And then after that will be.
I'm commenting on the 24th Street project. So I'll just wait my turn for when it comes up.
Okay, thank
Correct.
you.
Yeah.
And then we had, is it Miera?
Yes, thank you. This is Mira, and I was here for the 16th Street tree removal. I'm not really sure if that's going to come up today.
I don't believe that's on the agenda, is it?
It doesn't seem to be on the agenda, but there was a petition that went around, I think that which came under the 16th Street tree removal hearing. And I thought that was today, and that's why I'm here. I do believe it was Mr. Nolte's petition.
Yeah, the 16th Street hearing happened about a month ago.
Okay. I just got this, email, and it said it was today. So I showed up today. But in any case, may I put my comments for all trees in the chat, if that's all right?
That would not work. Please send it to the email address, urbanforestry@sfdpw.org.
Okay, then I've already done that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other hands up? We can go ahead and get started.
Okay, can people see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, hi, Stephen Keller. I'm a urban forestry inspector and certified arborist for San Francisco Public Works. The first case today is removal of one street tree without replacement adjacent to 1201 Market Street. Here's a photo of the site. There's tree 1 on the right and tree 2 on the left. The applicant is Bart, and they need to excavate in the sidewalk to access an equipment hatch, exposing and opening an existing access hatch that will be used to lower new traction power equipment into the Bart station. Originally, Bart applied to remove both trees, but through site meetings and working together, we are going to save tree number 1, and only tree number 2 is approved for removal. Due to the proximity of an intersection and the relocation of a fire hydrant, tree 2 will not be replaced, and the project will pay an assessed value of $4,000 to make up for the non-replacement. Again, here's a photo of tree 1, which is going to remain. The red lines in this photo indicate the limits of excavation and potential tree pruning needed during the construction activities. Here is another photo of tree 2. This is the tree that is approved for removal by Buff. And here the red lines are showing the limits of the excavation and footprint of the construction project and excavation, showing a significant amount of roots will have to be removed, and after which the tree really would not be sustainable. And here's a summary of the appraised cost using the 10th edition of the Landscape Appraiser's Guide. Again, in summary, tree number 2 is approved for removal due to a significant excavation needed to access some underground spaces. And we were able to work with Bart to save one of the 2 trees. Thank you. Yes, now the applicant can speak.
Okay, we have Mr. Roy Leggett. Go ahead, Mr. Leggett. Go ahead, Mr. Leggett, you should be able to speak.
Hi, I am the consulting arborist who's been working with BART and with Clark Construction and with Azul Works, all of who are coordinated. There's a joint venture between Azul and Clark. I know that Clark Construction has a representative. Well, he's supposed to be on this call, Jason. So if there are questions about what has to happen here, aside from what Stephen has already said, then I'm sure Jason can help address that. As far as the trees, tree number 2 will lose more than half of its root system right up to the trunk of the tree. The excavation goes to within that circular tree basin, which is very, very close to the tree, about a foot away from it. And then the hydrant has to be moved over to the curbside, and that'll be additional excavation to reconnect that. So the tree will basically be likely to fall down. With tree 1, there will be potentially a fair amount of pruning needed on the east side of the tree. However, the branches are predominantly in that direction due to the winds. So I don't think that that's inconsistent with what could be done to this tree anyway, as far as routine pruning. And the pruning would be done under our direction, tree management experts. And we would make sure that that work is done correctly according to the City of San Francisco pruning standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thank you. I want to reiterate my objection to the procedural infirmities of this hearing, just in the sense that I was not objecting to whether the applicants or people who had formally objected were aware of it. I'm talking about people who may not have formally objected and just tried to show up that would have been deterred from attending. And that's the procedural infirmity here. As for this particular removal, I just want to reiterate that this is an area with a less than 4% canopy and high rates of homelessness and poverty. And this is exactly where we should not be looking at just removing trees without any kind of mitigation plan. This is right across the street from the main library where 11 trees were just removed. I'm not sure if it's 8 or 11, but it was a large number of trees that were just removed last week. This is 1.5 blocks away from Hastings, where dozens of trees have been removed for construction. This is another just 1 block away from UN Plaza, where more than half a dozen trees were recently removed on an emergency basis. It's a few blocks away from the Upper Market Street project, where dozens more trees were removed recently. And also this is BART. Anyone who's been following the tree saga along Market Street knows that BART recently applied to remove around 4 dozen trees for its escalator project, canopy project along Market Street, which last month the Board of Appeals slapped back and told BART to go talk to the community and come back with a better mitigation plan. And I would respectfully assert that the same should be done here. This is hardly the place that we need to be taking out trees without replacement and without a more robust any kind. There's not even a mitigation plan here other than to just pay some money. That's not enough for what this community needs. And based on the recent history, especially of this area, which has a pathetic less than 4% canopy. Thank you.
Is there any response, Steve, to Mr. Clip? Actually, are there any other public members of public that would like to comment?
Yes, we have 2 other hands up at this time. Okay, Mira. Whoop. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, this is Mira, and Mr. Cliff said a lot of what I wanted to say, and I think, we have to try to save every possible tree. One of the examples that I was really heartened by, it was actually in India. And I'm hoping that we can adopt something like this here. In order to save trees, they moved a bus stop a couple of blocks. So, I wonder if that is something that we can consider here as well. Thank you.
Thank
Hello?
you, Mira. And we also have John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Okay, okay, great. So I protested this because of two things, several things. BART has been in San Francisco for over 50 years, and now they're deciding to put something, there and take out trees, as Mr. Clip explained, to all the trees in the immediate area that have been taken out in the last 6 months. And also the issue of the substation that's down the street for this, and that's probably where the power is coming for this vault that they want to put in. So my problem is, again, why all of a sudden now they're working across the street at the across from this location at the other got the entrance actually for BART across the street from this, and we were planning to put a grove of trees on where that location was. And that was part of the main library's plan, to put a grove of trees over where the BART is now still working on whatever they're doing on across the street from this location. So we as a community have been losing trees and we don't feel that this is appropriate for BART to come along and pick and choose besides with the canopies and even take out more trees, and then they feel that their only obligation is to pay a fee, prune a tree, and not do more mitigations. And they should have put all this together with all of the canopies, because again, this is a location where another entrance is for BART, and this should have been a part of the original canopy thing, instead of doing this piecemeal job of one by one taking out trees on Market Street. Thank you.
Hi. I ask that you protect the trees the way that you protect wild animal rights. The yearly pine tree massacre has made people feel that trees are disposable, and the reality is that trees start to keep records after 200 years and spread that information to nearby networks of trees. They're sentient, and these two trees on Market Street are essentially related, so cutting them down is cruel, it's selfish, and it's basically like killing a mom next to the dad. We've done enough damage trapping them in a cement box. So if you want to remove the tree, open the cement area more, uproot it, take the other tree with it, and plant them together somewhere else. I think we should rethink how we treat trees in San Francisco and model ourselves after Chicago's wider sidewalks with grass, bushes, and other trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Park, I see no other hands at this moment.
Yes.
That's not true. Michael Nolte has his hand up and has his hand up.
Who?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Can I speak?
Okay, I see a hand for David Wolf. Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
Hi, sorry about that. Thank you very much. I would like to ask a question of Mr. Keller, please, based on the observations of the other respondents. There seems to be something of a lack of coordination revolving BART's projects, infrastructure, plans to replant trees. So I would ask, please, Mr. Keller, what kinds of conversations did you have with BART about not removing trees and be able to that BART can continue the work that they need to do. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. From the way I understand this particular project, that this tree is located near an existing access hatch that they need to get access to, and they cannot do that without removing this particular tree. This is separate of the other BART tree removal projects that are associated with elevators or escalators and escalator awnings. This is just a one-off project that is separate of everything else BART has been doing. Is how I understand this one. And if there's, I think if Mr. Leggett said if there's someone else from the construction project that is able to speak on that, that would be helpful. Yeah, I think Jason.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Jason Robertson with Clark Construction, representing C3M Clark Cupertino, a joint venture. Yeah, the statement you made is correct. This project is separate from the escalator and canopy projects, which I know are also active on the Market Street corridor. The purpose of the project is to provide additional traction power to the subway system, which will allow additional trains to enter and exit through the Transbay tube. There are 2 locations. This is one of 2 locations. The plans did originally call for 2 trees to be removed. Through working with the DPW and Roy Leggett, we were able to determine that one of the trees can be pruned and that only 1 tree would need to be removed. To your point, the tree that needs to be removed is directly over the existing structure. So unfortunately, this is a structure that was put in place about 50 years ago. And so we don't really have any ability to adjust that. We need to expose the existing structure in order to install the equipment that's going to provide additional traction power to the subway system. So we are obviously working at this location to mitigate the impact. We understand that it is an impact to remove this tree, but due to the other utilities and the location at the intersection, we didn't know of any other option. So if there's any additional information you need, please let me know, Steve.
No, thank you. I think you can call on Michael.
Okay,
Nolte.
we have, yes.
Thank you. I had to reboot because of the fact that I wasn't being called on. Anyway, I'd like to point out that, what kind of outreach did BART do to begin with to the community about these plans? 2, it seems it's going to, their plans are so big that they're going to impact the Chase Bank. I happen to have a Chase Bank account, and you're basically making it no security for the two ATMs located there when you're going to have the public right on top of you when you're doing a transaction. Second, it's also doing the same thing for the entrance. No security when coming and going out of the Chase Bank. Second, it is also seems like it's going to cause some problems with the sidewalk. The crossing. And 3, it seems that there's also the issues with the trees. What kind of mitigations can be done by BART besides just giving some money? It seems like can't the tree be planted nearby instead by BART? I think that's more important that we, or actually 2 trees, because a tree is not good enough for the community. We seem to be losing trees right and left that was mentioned by the first speaker. And it also points out that, I also want to point out that we also lost some trees because of the project across the street, which is the one that's still being built that has the Whole Foods on it. So I think that there's, you know, Market Street is our main street, and we seem to have, you know, we're going to hardly have any trees by the time all these different projects are being finally finalized. And I think that this is a shame. People are doing this during COVID, when people are maybe are not really truly understanding all the things that are happening through the city and the city departments. Plus the fact that I also want to keep on protesting the fact that community outreach, when you know, now the MTA is having their own set of hearings on trees or public works, separate set of hearings here about trees that maybe people are not made aware of. So it comes down to public access to these different hearings. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. Ms. Park, I do not see any other hands.
Do you have any questions for me or want me to address anything? I don't see Robin's cell phone number as a panelist anymore, so she might not be here. Cerise, can you promote the phone number 090 back to panelist?
Okay, I am looking to see it.
Okay, I am back. Thank you.
I got it, Cerise.
Oh, there
sorry.
she is. Okay.
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 Yeah.
I do see one more hand up, actually.
Who? Did they already speak?
It's
Yes,
from Mira.
that's from Mira, and she did speak earlier. Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
thank
going to
you.
lower her hand.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me go again. I was just wondering if the city, I think all cities and developers and planners need to seriously consider sustainability and encourage and work with partners who are willing to save any bit that we can from the environment. And I'm wondering if the city does do that. Are you working with planners who come up with plans in order to save everything that they possibly can?
Yes, that is a thing that occurs in planning of construction projects. We try to work with different developers to preserve trees when it is possible.
I have a question. My hand was up.
Yeah, Sarah, you're next. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just in along those lines, you know, okay, so Bart has agreed just to remove one tree. That's great, but not removal would be perfect. And why can't Bart be encouraged, pushed into actually planting another tree in the area, since so many trees have been lost in that area and people are very concerned about it? And it seems like there's kind of a lack of concern from your part, the city's part, you know, to really, you know, take this in consideration when you're dealing with agencies like BART, to tell them, hey, no, this isn't good enough. You need to plant another tree in the area, maybe 2 more trees before we're going to let you do this project. That's a question.
Hi, baby girl, to me.
Okay, is that the last public comment? I mean, I can, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Coe. And no, I don't see any other hands at this time.
Yeah, I can try to address some of the comments. Again, we try our best to take each permit application as a one-off, even though clearly it is interconnected to the larger loss of trees in a given area. In this particular case, we felt it was unavoidable that to access the underground portion of the sidewalk, this tree had to be removed. When we talk about non-replacement, we generally talk about, we mean it by like, this site cannot be replaced. So that is what we mean by non-replacement. And when something cannot be replaced in kind in the same location, that is when we tend to charge additional fees. I can't speak to what led up to not talking about other trees planted in the area. The original inspector didn't bring that up, and it wasn't discussed. If it's something that the hearing officer would like to address, that could potentially happen. I can move on to the next case unless, Robin, you have any other questions for me? Robin, are you there?
Okay, I keep unmuting, but it doesn't seem to take. I have no other questions. I'm okay with moving on to 1580 Burke.
Okay. Right. Can people see my screen? Sorry. Can people see my screen now?
Now, yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. This is a site at 1580 Burke. The removal of one street tree with replacement. Trees on the cargo way frontage. Staff denied the removal and the applicant appealed. In this case, the applicant is the MTA. They've applied to remove or transplant one tree located on cargo way. The reason is construction of a new driveway. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a picture of a very large construction. I think it's a type of vehicle that helps reconstruct muni overhead lines. This is a picture of the tree. It's a Brisbane box that was planted in 2017 by the Bureau of Urban Forestry. The inspector denied the removal permit because the tree is healthy, and they thought the driveway could potentially be built between the two trees. This is the view from Cargo Way. What the MTA has proposed is to dig up the existing Brisbane box and shift it to the west. This is, I think that the top view is a more realistic picture of how the tree actually aligns with the garage opening. There's about 18 feet between the two trees, and if the driveway is built, it would require fairly frequent pruning of both trees to for the trucks to have access between them, and the driveway would have to be slightly offset from the garage entrance. If Buff's denial is overturned, we would need a commitment from the MTA to transplant as much soil and root mass as feasible and commit to weekly watering of 30 gallons of water until the new tree, this tree is self-sustaining, which would likely take 3 to 5 years. Thank you, that is all.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Do we have any comments from?
We should go to Ed Mcmillan. He works with the MTA.
Good morning. Can we hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, so our issue here is the Burke Street side of the building is a dead-end street. So the only way to get out with these vehicles is 3rd and Burke. And we ran into an issue last year where 3rd was backed up and our vehicles couldn't get out. And these are, you saw the picture of the vehicles. This is kind of our emergency response vehicles. all things overhead lines, subway related, lines down, someone hit the lines, snagged the lines, that sort of thing. These vehicles would respond. And then of course, if there's ever a citywide emergency, these vehicles would need to get out in a hurry. So this rear garage would be used primarily as an emergency exit when they couldn't get out on the 3rd and Burke Street side. The garage itself, I have better pictures I took after I submitted the earlier ones, and I apologize for the rudimentary drawings there, but the garage itself, the garage access door is 23 feet across, and the picture you showed earlier showed 19 feet, and that's very similar on the other side as well. There is an open basin. That picture you're showing right now that shows 18 feet, to the right of that, there is an open basin, another 18 feet over. So what we would really like, and of course, I apologize, I know nothing about trees, and if it's even possible, but just to pick up this tree and move it into the other basin. And then that would give us plenty of room to get our vehicles out when needed. And I think that's pretty much it, pretty straightforward. That is kind of an accurate photo. The one on top showing the tree it's not really in the middle of the garage door, but it does encroach on the garage door a good portion of the way. And it would be difficult to position a driveway and then to get the big vehicles between those two trees if left in the current configuration. But the picture on the bottom with my great drawing in the pink ink, that does show the empty basin there to the right.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. McMillan.
Any comments from? So Ed, you're representing MTA, so there's no other people, other individuals that would like to comment on this for the applicant?
No, you said 3 minutes, so we didn't want to have a big, long discussion.
Understood. Members of the public?
Yes, we have Sarah Coe. Go ahead, Sarah, you should be able to speak.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I just had a question. It looks like the other trees along that corridor there, they look like they're fairly new trees. Do you know how old those trees are?
Yeah, there was an Arbor Day project along Cargo Way in, I think, 2017. So there are some newer trees planted in that
And
area.
have they been watered weekly with thirds of water for 3 to 5 years?
Yes, to establish new trees, it's weekly watering for at least 3 years.
But that's what I'm asking are there records of that anywhere? Because I don't see the tree bags on there.
Yeah, the tree bag is in the photo, and the fact that the tree's alive, is proof that it had been watered.
Okay, because that's my concern. I mean, I appreciate people wanting to save the tree. And I understand access issues and all that, but I've seen enough working in the mission watering trees that a lot of times these trees aren't getting watered. And so when you transplant a tree, it really does go into shock. It does need that care, especially. So that would be my concern is making sure that tree gets watered while it gets reestablished.
Thank you, Ms. Coe. And we also have now John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Good morning. I have a couple of statements here. One, I don't understand why, if this is an SFMTA building and this is their property, why is this not heard by the SFMTA and why is it being heard by Buff? So that there's a confliction here going on here when you have two entities that have tree hearings, and here you have a perfect example of their own property, and they don't want to have a hearing on their own. So this is a conflict I have about three entities that I know of now that have the SFMTA, Bureau of Urban Forestry, and the PUC having their own hearings on trees, and the public doesn't understand that you're creating this quagmire of who is responsible for what, and if this is an MTA property, why isn't MTA having their own hearing on it and notifying the public that this is an MTA building? Now, next, coming into hearing that this is the back entrance to a facility that they've had, I have in hearing that the MTA is using this garage for the trucks. Well, how many years has SFMTA maintained this, been at this property? Obviously, we already heard that 2017, the trees were planted, and it was a Arbor Day of planting, which that means that's a special day that when the city goes off and puts in these trees. And now the MTA wants to use the back entrance all of a sudden. Why? For a garage. So I have very much problems with city agencies wanting to change the use of a property they've probably been using for a number of years, and then taking out trees just for the consideration of their exiting of a garage, which I don't find comforting to hear that. And the idea of moving the tree over, you're going to kill the tree if you move it over 6 feet. That is not an appropriate way to deal with a tree that's been established, and it won't survive the
30 seconds
to another location. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And we have Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I think it's pretty telling that a proposed transplant of this existing tree would be to a nearby empty basin, because what that means is that we're talking about moving a healthy tree to a spot where another tree once lived but was removed, and like hundreds of trees all over San Francisco, never replaced. And that's exactly the problem. And that's the reason why our city's rate of removal currently outpaces its rate of replacement, which anyone paying attention to the state of our world knows is exactly the wrong direction. But confoundingly, our city leadership seems to be at peace with that. If you approve the removal based on this plan to transplant, it would be great to know what are the odds that this tree would survive, who would be checking on that tree, how often would it be checked, how long would it take to ensure its survival, and what would the consequences be for its failure to establish. Finally, this is a great example of how our myopic thinking and one-off projects continue to contribute to the slow deterioration of our urban canopy. I would encourage everyone to, before any decision is issued here, take a drive along Cargo Way. I did that just last week. There are so many dead and suffering trees there. It should be a given that not only should it be entirely planted up, but all healthy trees should be preserved and not a single tree should be removed until those other dead trees are replaced. I would respectfully request this permit application be denied and that the SFMTA come up with a driveway plan that doesn't involve jeopardizing or killing another healthy tree, especially in the Bayview. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. And we also have Mr. Michael Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Oh, yes, this is Michael Nolte. It seems to me, one, does the emergency access door actually work? I really can't tell from the picture if it is an actual door, because if it's just a access panel and there isn't no actual driveway yet installed, then they're just assuming that this back panel is going to turn into a door, and then the driveway will be then installed. So these are plans for an access back door being established. So it's not yet any of those things. If I'm understanding this plan from the SFMTA. Two, I agree if a tree well is empty, that means that there was probably a tree there at one point. And what happened to that tree? Can the person from Buff explain to us what happened to that empty tree well? Obviously, when trees are planted, they're going to be planted in all the tree wells that are along the street. Two, also, it just seems to me that the trees are just a nuisance for people to take down and not maintain. I think that this street needs to have more greenery, especially it's another neighborhood that is probably very low on street trees, and planting trees instead of removing them is what I would rather be at a hearing listening to. How we're going to add more trees, and not always one by one project taking away trees for the convenience of either a city department or a developer or whoever else wants to do something to a tree because they consider them somehow in the way of their project. So again, possibly more than one tree replacement here, if possible, because after hearing, there's possibly other trees that have been neglected and need to be reestablished.
30 seconds.
There probably needs to be some sort of survey done, how many trees need to be replaced or removed or reestablished along just this one street. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. Mira, you may go ahead and speak.
Thank you. As a person with lung issues, I cannot emphasize enough the need for more trees. And it really seems that, we pay more attention to what is so-called progress in terms of technology and public transport, which is absolutely essential. But at the same time, we are losing the canopy and we are losing oxygen. And I don't have to say that it's important to everybody's life. I don't think mitigating is essential, but at the same time, cutting a good sized tree, which gives you way more oxygen, and then replacing it with a sapling is not the same, because the sapling takes time and resources to grow. And every bit of watering that the city has done for years and years for the tree to actually grow to this size is literally down the drain when you just cut it. So my point is, trees are essential to everybody's health, and planting a sapling and cutting down a mature tree is not the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Ms. Park, I do not see any other hands at this time.
Steve, Mr. Keller or Mr. I guess MTA, do you have any comments back?
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, there was a 2017 Arbor Day event, and along Cargo Way, approximately, I wouldn't know how many, 20 to 40 trees were planted on Cargo Way proper. I don't know what happened to the empty basin to the west. I do know there is a very large eucalyptus tree outside of the picture that used to have a very large branch that overhung that individual tree basin. So it's likely that that site was not planted during Arbor Day because we wouldn't have put a tree under that other large tree, but that's an assumption. And again, if removal were allowed, the MTA would be on the hook as a condition of the permit to ensure a matured tree was established in the basin to the west. Whether they try to transplant this one and it dies, and if that does die, then they'd be responsible to plant a new one, and then water that for another 3 years. So the MTA will be on the hook to establish a tree at this site. And Ed has his hand raised.
Yeah, just to chime in real quickly, the door does work. Someone referenced that. The door is a working door. And this actually is a new site for us. This is part of the animal care and control swap out. Animal care and control got that, the new brick building they just remodeled and opened up right by the freeway there. And that was our old overhead lines building. So we swapped out with animal care and control. With the pandemic, I can't remember my dates, but it's about 3 years ago. So, and this, like I said, it never was an issue. The back door working, they roll it up, but there's a fence right there. We need to install a gate. But the problem was when they got stuck at Burke and 3rd and weren't able to get to where they needed to get to, that the thought that we need a rear exit for emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mcmillan. There is no other hand from any other MTA representative, Ms. Park.
I have a question for Ed or Mr. McMillan. Does the garage door, or I guess it will depend on how maneuverable your vehicle is, can you not skew the driveway?
Am I still?
Yes.
Good to hear you.
It's very hard to tell with these pictures from Google Street View, but that's now there's the fence is very close to the building, so there's not a lot of skewing room. Okay. You're right. That would have been the easiest thing to do. And these are, they're not as long as fire engines, but certainly as big and wide. So think of like a squat fire engine coming out of that door. It does need some maneuvering room or just move straight. And we don't want them to be in a hurry and have to, tightly maneuver around obstacles was the thinking.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that it's hard to tell how much space you have between the fence and the building.
It is. And even the Google Street View is kind of off. The tree in the picture looks like it's right in the middle. It's not, it's almost a third into the doorway, not quite in the middle like it shows.
All right, that was the only question I had. Anybody else?
There's no one else from the MTA raising their hand.
I think I'm good. We move on to the next item.
Okay. You guys can still see my screen? Correct?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The next case is 3236 24th Street. The removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 3236 24th Street. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. This is a current photo of the site. There are 2 ficus microcarpa trees adjacent to a parking lot at 24th and Cap Street. The property owner does have a building permit in process to build a new 5 or 6 story building here. This is just a quick rendering of what is proposed at the site. The primary reason Buff approved removal of both trees is the anticipated impacts to the root systems of both trees. The parking lot area will be excavated down for a building foundation, and 2 new PG&E vaults are planned for the sidewalk, which requires large excavations and trenching for conduits. This is a picture of tree number 1. It is a ficus microcarpa tree. We anticipate it would suffer significant root loss. On the photo on the right shows the area that will be excavated for the foundation. And given there's never been a previous building here, we're assuming there is a large amount of root mass underneath the blacktop beyond the sidewalk. And then on the left shows a rough estimate of where a PG&E vault is planned, and then the blue sweeping line is how the conduit will track into the new development. So this tree is going to lose, or the structural roots on the, this would be the northwest side of the tree, will be greatly affected. And here's the second tree at the site, is also a ficus microcarpa. Due to just building construction, the above ground portion, it would likely lose 1/3 to 1/2 of the canopy because the tree currently grows over the property line. And then in terms of root impacts, the red lines show where the foundation excavation will go. This is I think it's a 10-foot sidewalk. And then to the left of the tree, you have an existing PG&E vault. There will need to be electrical conduit trenching around that tree to connect to another new vault on the right side. So this tree likely suffered significant root impacts on the east and north side of the tree. And this from a health and structural integrity standpoint, we don't think the tree should remain after that. And unfortunately, it's just an unavoidable method of construction. This is showing what is planned after construction. I've worked a lot with the applicant to make sure we can fit 2 new trees in here in regards of placing the vaults, the sewer lines. So we plan to either have them plant 2 24-inch box trees with either ginkgo or red maple. And then the project would also have to pay 4 in lieu fees because there are 4 trees short of the general building code requirement for new tree planting. And additionally, there's a lot of history to tree removal on 24th Street. So in 2019 and 2020, the 24th Street and Mission community fought Public Works to preserve approximately 70 ficus trees. 33 of those trees were eventually removed in 2020. So, and then currently the community is obviously unhappy about the loss of additional trees that they had fought to remove. So the project architect and Buff and some community members are attempting to divert some of the, so this project already has to pay a little bit over $200,000 in Eastern neighborhood infrastructure impact fees. And what the project would like to do to give back to the community is earmark some of those funds to go to the Bureau of Urban Forestry to target additional planting throughout the neighborhood. The architect, Lev Weisbach, has gotten some approval from planning and has made contact with a chair from the Eastern Neighborhoods Community Advisory Committee. And they have plans to present at their next meeting. So, you know, despite losing 2 trees that the community has fought to preserve, there is a plan in motion to try to get more funding and do more targeted planting near this site. That is all. Thank you. I think you can call on Lev.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. We've been working on this project for about 5 years, and you know, development in San Francisco is always very challenging. The project is sponsored by Caprails LLC, which is actually Dominic and Joseph Galou, who have been longtime residents and real estate owners in the neighborhood. Their family has been in the neighborhood since 1950. I'm also a Mission District native and grew up on 22nd Street. So I guess we don't feel like we're sort of the out of town developer coming in and trying to not play well with the community and take advantage. I know you might have heard that before and not believe it, but I do feel very strongly about that. So the photograph that's up on the screen right now is the 5 trees that were on the site when we first started working on the project. Back in, I think, 2018, there was a fairly strong windstorm. And if Stephen can go to the next image, you'll see that a number of branches sheared off of some of the existing trees. And luckily nobody was walking by the site at the time, but DPW had an emergency order for the project owner to remove those trees. So that's how we've sort of gone from what was originally 5 trees at the site down to the existing 2. I'm sure they're in much better shape now that they've been pruned. The next slide, you know, this idea that the trees are important to the community and that the community has, you know, very strong identity is something I'm hoping that everybody realizes we try to pay attention to from the get-go. As an architectural designer, sense of place and who lives there and who we're building things for is very important, certainly to me. And we worked with Calle 24 to explain, you know, what our intentions were. And these are some of the images that we used internally in a sort of our inspiration board. So understanding the roots of the neighborhood relating back to, you know, South and Central America, building form and color. So after a number of meetings and discussions, let's go to the next slide. We agreed with Calle 24 that we would basically give over the building facade for the installation of a mural. This is only an example. We've overlaid an existing mural artwork on the building to show what the intent will be, and there'll have to be a public process to finalize the mural. What you can also see in this, the upper area where it's sort of green is that at the very beginning of the design process, the planning department wanted us to step the building back at the 4th floor to create a massing that was a little bit more in keeping with the scale of the neighborhood. And we've taken advantage of that to develop a large landscape terrace. And then that terrace is covered with photovoltaic panels. And you know, we're trying to do the best we can in terms of providing a sustainable building, incorporating the photovoltaic panels into the building to offset some of the energy use. The next slide.
Mr. Lev, that is your 3 minutes. Ms. Park, did you want him to continue?
How much
It's under the
longer
understanding, yeah, that we had sort of unlimited time as the project sponsor, but if
okay, Ms. Park.
It would be good if Lev could touch on the impact funds and what he's discussed.
Sure.
Yes, I'm okay with you continuing, but as long as you don't take too much time.
Okay, well, here, why don't we just jump to the last slide then?
Yeah.
So we've been working, as Stephen has noted, with both planning and the Eastern Neighborhoods Community Advisory Committee to divert the impact funds to a tree planting program. Planning has signed off in concept, and so has the Eastern Neighborhoods Community Advisory Committee. The application process is ongoing, and our next step in that is to meet with the Eastern Neighborhoods Community Advisory Committee and to present the plan, get their approval, and then move to the next step, which is having the application move through the planning department. I did get a notification yesterday from the planning department from Rich Hillis that once we do have their approval formally, that then their project funding issues will work through an organization called Citywide, which is an organization I'm not familiar with in terms of how we divert the funds. Stephen and I have talked about the sort of area in which we would try to, where our intention isn't to increase the tree planting. And so this circle represents about a 10-block radius from the project site moving to the east. I would definitely, really love to work with Josh Klipp and his organization, Mission Verde, to identify, the most impact we can make. Do we find some streets that have very few trees? What is the right, way to go to really enhance the community canopy? So we look forward to moving on to that. And we really would like to get the tree removal approved so that we can start the foundation work. There's one other little minor thing that I know Eric Arguello from Kai 24 is concerned with. There's the banner system that has been installed along 24th Street, which I think is really beautiful and is a great addition to the street. There's some support issues that we'll work with him to make sure that we don't impact that system and that all the banners that are there will remain, because some of the ropes that support the banners go through the trees that need to be removed. So that's one thing that we'll work with Kaya 24 to make sure that that happens.
Okay, thank you. Therese, do we have public that wants to speak with their hands up?
Yes, we have Etna Mira Raya. Go ahead, you should be able to speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can hear you.
Okay, yes, I'm Edna, the Lorax here again. Those ficus trees are really beautiful, and they look like they're a little bit older than the other trees we were discussing on other streets. They're growing over the property line because that's what trees do. They grow, so let's let them grow. If we treated the trees with personhood, there wouldn't be any discussion. If a person was trapped under cement, the city wouldn't cut off the person's legs. They would do everything they could to save the whole person and not care how much damage they would cause to the property. And I know that the city just cares about money as usual. So if the tree removal was given a large fine, perhaps construction like this could be more careful with planning around a tree's life. I'm unsure why a mural was discussed. If only we could paint over a tree and make it go away, but that's not what happens. That sounds like a distraction from the actual tree removal. Replacing a tree, an old tree, with a new tree is just starting the cycle all over again. So in another 30 to 50 years, you'll be doing this again, never allowing a tree to grow and outlive us, which is what trees do if you leave them alone. I ask that you protect the trees the way you would wild animal rights again. Let's not treat trees as disposable, and let's treat them with respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Raya. And we have Joshua Klipp. Go ahead, Mr. Klipp.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So as the removal applicant mentioned, this has been in the works for 5 years, which I'm going to get back to in a minute. With regard to Calle 24's perspective on this project, I would hope that they would be invited to hear, to speak for themselves. We're not talking about housing here that supports the local community writ large. It's not affordable housing. So we're kind of talking about a mural on housing that most people who actually live in the neighborhood can't afford to live in. Now, I suspect there are some people who know the history I'm about to review, so let me just jump into this. These are trees that the community rallied to save with Herculean efforts. At the original departmental hearing, there were over 130 people who showed up to protest the removal of these trees. There were 4 coordinated appeals, nearly 2 years of community meetings and meetings with city officials, countless hours of work behind the scenes to come up with a plan. And finally, and importantly, a GoFundMe that happened in the middle of a pandemic that was funded by the people of this community who were already economically suffering, to hire our own arborist to evaluate these trees. And that is the only reason why those trees are standing there today, is because of all of that community work. So now here we are, not even a year later, not even a year after that process was wrapped up, talking about removing these trees, when our city leadership knew darn well that this project was in process and did not inform any of us during any of that process. Frankly, it feels like a bait and switch on a community that worked its butt off to save these trees and is now working its butt off every single week with over 100 volunteers watering trees up and down Calle 24 that are now part of Mission Verde's project. It is profoundly disheartening to hear this removal treated almost like any other tree removal. I do want to hear more from Steve and from Lev regarding this proposed mitigation. I appreciate that I'm seen as a point person and a person who creates paths forward. I take that as a compliment. However, this removal should not be decided without Calle 24 community, full community outreach, and a plan that in some measure attempts to build public trust and acknowledges the work that this community did for those trees along this cultural corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klipp. We have David Wolf. Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is David Wolf, and I'm speaking here today as a 30-year resident of the Mission and as a participant in the community process to preserve as many of the ficus trees along 24th Street as possible that began in March 2019. I also speak as the administrator of the fundraising campaign that enabled the community to hire an independent professional arborist to examine the city's assessment of the health and safety of the trees scheduled for removal. More than 80 individual donors contributed nearly $5,000 to help save as many ficus trees as possible on 24th Street. Their contributions are grounded in the belief that community action is the basis of our democracy's well-being and that good governance is rooted in the people's will. This trust in the relationship between community and governance should not be taken lightly. The 2 ficus trees we're discussing today are examples of this trust in action. The community and the city reached an agreement to preserve 15 ficus trees from the final 24th Street removal order, including these 2, by putting in place a multi-year tree maintenance plan to ensure both the tree's health and the public safety. Thanks to this agreement, these 2 mature trees are both healthy and safe and continue to hold their decades-old place in our neighborhood as much valued community assets. To cut down these 2 trees now, after 2 years of good faith negotiations for the sake of a private development, would be a slap in our community's face and would be understood rightly as the betrayal of the public trust. Removing these 2 trees now serves neither the community's best interests nor the department's efforts to be more sensitive to them after years of widely recognized neglect. The fragile trust engendered by our negotiated agreement would surely be destroyed along with the ficus trees upon their removal. We asked the department to enjoin the project developer to rethink his infrastructure design that would result in the removal of these 2 trees. Specifically, we request that the hearing officer ask the following questions of Mr. Weisbach. 1, prior to today's hearing, to what extent were you familiar with the negotiated agreement between the community and the city that spared these 2 particular trees from removal and provides for their care? 2, what, if any, alternate design and infrastructure solutions did your team consider to prevent cutting down these 2 trees? And thirdly, having now heard the conflict your current design creates, how could you reconfigure the proposed infrastructure to honor the existing agreement and preserve these 2 trees? We ask that DPW reconsider the permit to cut down these 2 trees in light of the significant harm the removal will cause all parties concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. We have Mr. Lance Carnes. Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'd like to share my screen. Can I get permission to do that?
Okay, just one moment and I will promote you to panelist. And then at that time, you will need to go ahead and unmute yourself again once you come in. So just a moment. You'll need to unmute yourself one more time, Mr. Carnes.
So how are we doing? Can
Yes,
you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Let's see. Let me find my fingers. So, let me get it back to the beginning. Okay, so my name is Lance Carnes, and I've been working actually with the 24th Street people for about 3 years. So these trees are important to me too, even though I don't live in the neighborhood. When I saw the announcement on the DPW website, site number 12 at 3236 24th Street, some kind of a numbers wonk, and I have data where I can actually draw a map of what they're talking about. And the trees that are in a dark color are the ones that have already been removed. And I'm guessing that one that's green is one of the trees that is going to be removed, but doesn't look like it. And I looked a little further. I discovered that someone, I think it was Mr. Keller, went into the database and mashed the longitude and latitude values for trees number 1 and 4, not trees 1 and 2, but numbers 1 and 4. So they appear as one tree in the map. So Buff inspectors modified the tree database so that trees 1 and 4 are the same position. And the tree database is an official record that must not be modified directly in order to maintain its integrity. I have a snapshot of the database 2 years ago, and the longitude, latitude are correct. DPW maintains a tree photo file. For example, tree 2, which has already been removed, has a photo history. You can see here. Tree 4, which is still there, has only one recent photo. Other historic photos were deleted. So what we just saw, Buff inspectors modified official tree records after the city spent $500,000 to provide accurate tree records. After all the modifications, Buff still announced the wrong trees for removal, tree 1 and 2 rather than tree 1 and 4. So recommendations, I would like you to deny the removal. And I think Buff should correct its errors. And I'm sure you're all asking yourself, why am I here pointing out seemingly small errors? So this is yet another instance where I believe Buff staff changes its database to suit its interests rather than to maintain an accurate tool for urban forest management. During the 3 years I've been studying DPW's tree database, I've seen countless database errors introduced by Buff staff. I believe many of these erroneous changes are to benefit developers and government agencies who
30
want trees
seconds
out of the way so that they will have an easier and less expensive way forward. I believe, and I'm sure many of you do as well, that the purpose of Buff should be to act as stewards of our urban forest. Unfortunately, when I see unforced areas like these on 24th Street, it reinforces the notion that Buff's true interests lie elsewhere. That's the end of my comments. I just wanted to respond to a comment made by Mr. Weisbach. The 3 trees that are currently gone were gone during the 2017 citywide census. Thank you.
Therese, any other hands up?
Yes, we have 3 more hands. Mr. Michael Nolte, go ahead.
Yes, this is Michael Nolte, and I think that a lot of the 16th Street brought together a lot of people about the trees, even though there were already people discussing ficus trees throughout the neighborhood, throughout the city, when there was a large number of trees being removed by Buff. And going to the developer and his proposed plans that he pointed out. Well, first of all, I think one needs to know that murals are put on buildings for public art purposes, and that's part of the planning process. So that's not really something special he's doing for the community. That's something's required for him to do for the community. But if you looked at the pictures that were presented, there were murals already in the parking lot. So he's not really replacing the murals that will be destroyed during this process. And I happen to belong to a mural project in San Francisco, and murals are property of the owners that put them up. And so are you compensating the owners that actually painted those murals? I didn't hear about that. Also, since it's about trees, I think that I'm happy to hear that he wants to plant more trees in the neighborhood, but that only makes it so that his project can be approved by the planning department, and that's public relations. So let's get real about what's going on here. And I like to hear how he's helping the people that actually live in the neighborhood and could possibly move into his new development. Not just something that looks good as far as drawings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. We have Marie Sorensen. Go ahead, Ms. Sorensen.
Hi, my name's Marie Sorensen, and I was also part of the process to save the trees, and it was a lot of people with a lot of hard work. So we felt pretty good on saving what we did and not happy about what we lost. And now we have every Tom, Dick, and developer coming to the neighborhood wanting to take trees down because it inconveniences them. I hope the trees stay. And in fact, there were 4 trees and there's now only 2. And they say they're going to replace 2 and pay in lieu fees to help support Mission Verde. Well, are you going to also pay to have the trees watered? I would like the city to deny the destruction of 2 very beautiful ficus trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sorensen. We have Sarah Coe. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah Coe, and I'm a Mission District resident. And I was also involved with saving the ficus trees on 24th Street. And I know the developer mentioned that, how challenging it is to develop in San Francisco. Well, if our city agencies did their job, like the planning department, and paid attention to the community and what we desire, what we want, what we need, then maybe we wouldn't have, these kinds of meetings where you find challenging. If the planning department had listened, if Buff had told the planning department, no, these trees need to be saved. You need to make sure this project is planned around these trees as best you can, instead of business as usual. Let's have a hearing, we need to take the trees out because it's in the way of the building. I just find it insulting. It's like, we did a lot of hard work. Like Marie said, we really put a lot of heart into it, and huge meetings with the community, huge support for the trees. And just to have it be business as usual still, I mean, it's unbelievable. And also these to be insult to injury, these apartments are not built for mission residents who are looking for places to live. These are high-end units that are going to be market rate sold. It's, you know, another slap in the face to the community here. So that, I don't know. It just seems like nothing's really changed in our Buff. You need to listen. You know, you made an agreement. Now you're trying to renege on your agreement. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's really insulting. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coe. We have John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Good morning. Does the hearing officer have my letter? Yes or no?
I'm not aware of any letter at this point, but I'm sure I could get a copy.
Well, see, that's my point. I sent a letter in yesterday. You don't have the letter. Here's the hearing. I have no, when I sent a letter in, don't even know that it's been recognized. That's problem number one. Next issue is Buff seems to come at the end of these projects. I want to know how long Buff has known about this specific project since it's been in the works for the developer just stated for 5 years. How long has Buff known about this project? And I want a truthful answer and how you've negotiated with the project sponsor, how many years back? That's number one. Next issue. I, again, was at City Hall 2018 when we heard the removal of the trees on 24th Street. And I participated. I participated in dealing with this issue. Multiple times down to 24th Street, taking pictures and talking to the store owners and other people in the locations to see what the feeling was of the neighborhood. Taking my time to discuss the neighborhood where only a few blocks away my father was born. I am very upset with Buff and their inability to come to the table, make an agreement, and then renege on it a year later. This is very wrong. And plus, in my letter, I have a petition that is signed by over 9,000 persons to save ficus trees, including the trees on 24th Street. When the petition was started, they were included and their signatures are on there. So I'm speaking now for over 9,400 people who want to save ficus trees in San Francisco. And this is not right for how Buff in one is not discussing alternatives of moving the vaults needed for this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And yes, all of the letters have been sent to the hearing officers. You just may not have had time to review them all yet. I do not see any other hands at this time, Ms. Park.
Thank you. Mr. Keller, do you have anything, or the developer?
Yeah, I would say I've been an urban forestry inspector in the mission for 5 to 6 years. I did know about this development starting in 2016 or 2017. It's taken a very long time to get to this point in the building permit. I do regret not bringing up this site during the initial 24th Street negotiations. I think that with the community, I think that would have been that very valuable information. I believe it would have been in 2020. I told the hearing, I told the architect and the project that we would likely deny these trees for removal. but then the more the plan, like the more the project sent me utility designs and building designs, and the fact they have to have 2 new vaults and not 1, it became more apparent that, you know, in order to build the building, that the roots will be drastically affected. And like I said, I thought it was appropriate to try and save the trees, but we think that just given the amount of impacts to the root system, that the trees could, 1, become unsafe, or 2, will begin to decline in health. And that, you know, the best long-term decision is planting 2 new large stature trees at this site. So in 10 years, you are going to have 2 large trees. Yeah, and I guess that's the story of this site and me. And I do think it was a flaw that we didn't, you know, bring this particular site to the community earlier. But in terms of being able to build the building and save the trees, we think removing the 2 trees is the best option. I guess David Wolf had questions for the architect, just whether they were familiar with the history of 24th Street, and just what efforts were put into to attempt to save the trees. Lev, do you have anything else to add from the comments you heard?
Thanks, Stephen. I think I probably became aware of the controversy about the tree removal through some press clippings in maybe 2018, 2019. At least I became aware of the DPW's plans to remove the trees, but I was sort of caught off guard about the community's pushback on it. And you know, the projects that we work on, they oftentimes will go fallow for a long time while we're under review in certain aspects of the approval process. And so we might, you know, lose track. There are some, you know, unique circumstances to this lot. First of all, it's the old train route from the old train line that ran from San Jose all the way through San Francisco down to Harrison Street and then downtown. And so the shape of the lot's unique, which really impacts the, you know, development potential of the lot, which is why it's sat fallow for many, many years, even though it was under the family ownership. The other thing that's really unique is that there are just a ton of utility boxes about halfway from the middle of the site up toward the Cap Street end. There are, you know, telecommunications boxes and street light boxes and street light, stoplight controls. And when Stephen, you know, brought up the issues that he had and wanted to protect the trees, I think Stephen, we've been working on it now with you for 14 months. So, you know, he gave us a shout out that he was really concerned about it. We worked with our civil engineer and we relocated the utility boxes and every other utility we needed to feed the project with probably 3 times to try to find the maximum way to arrange everything in order to be able to save as many of the potential for tree planting along the sidewalk. And what we've landed on is kind of the best that we can do. There's been some discussion about whether or not we could add a 3rd tree by moving a street light up to the corner of Cap Street. And that's still certainly something, you know, that we were willing to ponder. But so yes, we've tried really hard to work with the utility layout. I just want to point out that the project is not a high-end for sale project. It is a rental project, and the units are very small. So by nature, they're not high-end units. We're right near a half a block away from a BART station. So in terms of a very, you know, wider view of providing housing in California, this is an ideal site for housing, and I'm familiar with affordable housing and work on affordable housing projects. And this just happens to be one where the owner is in the neighborhood and is seeing this site as something that they want to develop housing for. And then finally, we're really trying to do the right thing and work with the community and do as much mitigation as we possibly can to improve other areas of the neighborhood and plant more trees and really work with the community. And we look forward to doing that.
Thank you. So that should be it for this. Are we ready to move on to the next topic or next item?
I believe so. All right, I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, the next item is 445 Ortega Street, removal of 2 significant trees on private property with replacement of 6 significant trees. For people that are not aware, a significant tree is a tree located on private property, but located within 10 feet of the public right-of-way, and the trees have to meet a certain size requirement, either being 20 feet tall, 15 feet wide, or have a diameter of 12 inches or greater. At this particular site, even though it is relatively wooded, there are only 2 trees that qualify as significant, being that they're the only 2 trees within 10 feet of the public right-of-way. It's 2 Monterey pine trees. The 2 trees were approved for removal due to construction on private property at the site. There is a proposal and a building permit application to build new building along the entire property line. I believe it's 2 new separate homes, and in addition to an existing building there as well. You can see in this photo, the 2 red X's in the bottom right are the location of the 2 existing pine trees. So there would be significant grade reduction and soil removal in order to build these buildings. So it would not be possible to preserve these trees. Both trees are Pinus radiata. The trees are in good condition. And if not for development at the site, the Bureau of Urban Forestry would not have approved the trees for removal. And generally, we have a policy of if the trees are within the footprint of new development and on private property, we almost always approve those trees for removal. And here's a photo of tree number 2. There's also a Pinus radiata. Again, we're not stating that there's anything wrong with the trees. They're healthy, but they are on private property in the footprint of a planned building construction. Given the length of the property frontage, post-construction, they would be required to plant 4 trees, but they are planning to plant 6 trees so that they're able to plant the 4 required per code, plus an additional 2 to replace the pine trees. And all the trees are going to be planted within the property line. And you can see that the buildings are set back a good way from the property line. So the trees are planned in the front landscaped area. And they have, it's hard to see on this plan, but we have worked with them to develop a utility plan so these trees are possible and are not interfering with sewer lines and water lines and gas lines. That is all. Thank you.
Is the applicant here and ready to speak?
I see a hand for Jeremy Schaub. Go ahead, you should be able to speak now.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Great. My name is Jeremy Schaub of Schaub Lee Architects. We are proposing 2 new buildings here and an addition and expansion of the existing building. It's a bit of an unusual lot configuration, but we do have a 10-foot setback. And as mentioned before, we do need to regrade a good portion of the property for this project. So the buildings would be set back about 10 feet, which is the neighborhood pattern. However, unlike the rest of the neighborhood, we are planning to have 6 trees. Most of the neighbors' front yards are concrete and some shrubs, but we hope to have 6 full-grown trees here. And a bit about the 2 existing trees. We have an arborist report, and he should be on the line to speak later, but where he said the trees are in good health, but they're poor structure, that they have codominant trunks. So they're at risk of failure in that sense. So we do feel that in the long run, this is going to be a better project for the urban tree canopy. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Schaub. I don't see any other hands for the representative, or actually there is one hand with phone number ending in 610. Go ahead, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, this is Roy Leggett. I'm the arborist who was just mentioned by Mr. Schaub. I've had to move to a phone call in from my laptop. So that particular property, I just want to make mention of a couple of issues. Well, the 2 Monterey pines that are significant trees, they do have codominant structure. The stems are inherently seriously flawed with major weaknesses in the attachment of the stems that are, well, in this case, they're not even vertical. They're off to one side. But that is an issue, I think, much more so because many of the trees upslope that are on this property that are not regulated trees are either dead or dying. Pine pitch canker is killing Monterey pines regionally. And it's not really about looking at individual trees in terms of stability or safety factors. It's about looking at grove integrity. Once the Monterey pines are being lost for any reason within a grove of trees like this, which they are, and it's simply a health issue with unregulated trees that are adjacent. The remaining trees are now fully exposed to winds that they were previously protected from. So the risk factors change the equation for those 2 trees. But I think putting the 6 trees back in as configured and worked out with Mr. Keller is a great solution, and it will enhance the neighborhood quite nicely. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Ms. Park?
Yes, anybody else representing the applicant? What about public comments?
We do have a hand for public comment. Mr. Clip, go ahead, Mr. Clip, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. One thing I'd like to point out is that Mr. Leggett, who is a respected arborist in the Bay Area, also offered an opinion on the main library trees that the Bureau of Urban Forestry chose to ignore. So if any basis for approving removal here includes that opinion, it would certainly be confusing to the public why the city would listen in this instance, but not in the main library removal. Full disclosure, I got distracted for a moment by some other work because I actually do have day work to do despite sitting through 2 hours of hearings this morning. So I spaced out a little bit, but it seems to me that the development here is it to add garages? Whatever it is, this is another example of removing trees from development, which is something that happens every day in the city, and is another reason why our urban canopy continues to suffer at a time that we cannot afford it. Finally, the trees at issue here, at least a few of them, are indigenous trees that support native ecology. And while I've heard talk of what's best for development, I have not heard anything about what's best for our native ecology. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. And we have Mr. John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Good afternoon. First, I want to start off by saying that I actually am one of the persons that did this significant tree ordinance for San Francisco and started it because of a tree that was going down in my neighborhood. So therefore, I'm very well about significant trees. And also, again, the purpose of the ordinance was to save trees, not to take them out. And so, to use the ordinance in this way to, really not mitigating anything here for the plans of putting on a piece of property. What I heard was the home that's currently there wants to expand and then build 2 other homes on the property. And also by putting the 6 trees in the front of the properties, well, that's already part of every 10 feet, there's supposed to be a tree anyway. So I don't hear anything really new here or helping, deal with the current trees and their health. Here you hire an arborist, but the arborist doesn't say how to, instead of, he's only saying how to, reasons to take away the trees, but he's not saying how to save the trees. And so therefore, I like to see the arborist report saying, how are you saving the trees that are currently on this lot for prosperity for the neighborhood versus taking them out for the well-being of San Francisco, because San Francisco needs all the trees that it has, and not be taking it out just because somebody wants to develop on their parcels or put in three houses, two and a half houses here on this location. So I don't see any given rationale for this item to go forward, and I would submit that the above deny the permit to remove these significant trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And now we have Mr. Michael Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte, you should be able to speak.
Yes, this is Michael Nolte, and yes, the significant tree legislation was really developed for the fact of when a tree on private property was being removed because the new heirs had come along and decided to put in a driveway. This is no different than what's going on here. And, the point was the neighbors were amazed watching the tree slowly be hacked down by the saws. And I actually took a footage of it. People were just, mind boggled watching a 100-year-old tree being removed just because the new heirs wanted to turn their property into an Airbnb, their family house, and make money off of the property. Anyway, besides all that, I appreciate the arborist's report. I think he does good work. Especially when it is a pro bono for the community. I just have we have issues with the facts that developers just basically want to do what they want to do and find ways to basically make more money. I would like to put, restriction on their property and let them have, if they're going to do this, have them stay in their property for 50 years or more, so that they don't sell the house for a profit, because that's what basically will happen is the property will obviously increase in value after this development goes through, which seems like, seems to be happening right and left every time we have a hearing. The developers want to do something more to their property. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. Ms. Park, I do not see any other hands at this time.
All right, Mr. Keller, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with the arborist, Roy Leggett, that the trees do have slightly, hazardous structure in the fact that they have two very large trunks or large stems that originate near the base. Obviously, it's not an imminent failure characteristic, but it's something that has an increased likelihood of failure. But also, given the species of the tree, Pinus radiata, it is susceptible to a disease called pitch pine canker that, as the trees tend to get to the upper ages, maybe 70 to 90 years, that combined with drought and other things, and once they do start to decline in health, pitch pine canker and a certain type of beetle is killing these trees in mass throughout California. So in all likelihood, there's a high likelihood that even within 10 years, these trees would die. That being said, the significant tree ordinance is meant to preserve, it's meant to preserve trees, but it also institutes, you now have to go through the permitting process to remove these trees instead of just being able to remove them at will. So it is serving its process or its purpose there in the fact that they cannot just remove them, but they do have to go through public works process. And we think that the removal of these trees and replacement of the 6 is, although it'll be hard to make up for the canopy that these trees provide, it's decent. Thanks.
Thank you. What are the 6 new trees species is going to? It's not going to be the same trees, right?
No, it would. Let me see if I can go back to I personally did not do review on this project, so I don't know what species are planned. Given the setback and the fact there's no utility lines, it'll likely be a species off of our medium tree list. I think I wouldn't want to put a large species or a small, but I think a medium would maximize the canopy cover for the site.
Excuse me, Miss Park, Mr. Leggett is raising his hand. Should I
yeah,
allow him to speak?
He might have the idea.
Go ahead, Mr. Leggett.
Hi, this is Roy Leggett. Thank you, Mr. Keller, for your more in-depth analysis on the Monterey pine issues that we're having, both the structural stuff and the health issues. You did a more thorough job than I did, so that's great. And that's accurate. Unfortunately, we are losing Monterey pines, and we have been losing Monterey pines generally in the area from the disease and insect issues. But I wanted to specifically address, well, starting with Mr. Clipp's request for kind of an environmental concern or issue about new trees being planted well, I think the point made was that there are a couple of native trees on the site, and that's true. I mean, they're regionally native. They're not native to San Francisco, but they're native regionally, and they do provide environmental benefits. What I asked of the developer is if they would be open to planting native species for the 6 new trees, and I got an affirmative. Yes, they would be. So I think that's really good news. Having just pockets of high environmental value scattered around through neighborhoods where you have native trees available is very, very valuable, and increases the sustainability for wildlife. So we're willing to address the new tree species in concert with Bureau of Urban Forestry to come up with species that are agreeable to them and appropriate in size. I think medium-sized trees is appropriate as well, but we're willing to use native species. So I think that's also of significance on this particular property. So that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with hands raised?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, then we can move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you. The final item today is Public Works Order 205879. Is that, you guys can still see my screen, correct?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, 66 Mountain Spring Avenue. It is the removal of 8 significant trees on private property with replacement of 3 significant trees and 2 street trees within the public right-of-way. Again, a significant tree is a tree within 10 feet of within 10 feet of the right-of-way, but on private property, but meets a certain size requirement. At this particular site, there is 2 hedgerows of species of podocarpus that flanks the driveway. Buff has approved the removal of these trees due to the construction at the site. They're going to be demoing the existing building, building a new 3-story building, and this will involve regrading and realignment of the driveway, which would require removal of the hedgerows. This image is slightly messy, but the 2 yellow lines are meant to indicate the edges of the new driveway, and then the green numbered circles are the current location of the 2 hedgerows. So they can see they're realigning where the driveway is, and they're also going to have to change the grade, which would require removal of the existing trees. On each side of the driveway, the first 4 individual trunks are what were within the 10-foot zone. So those qualified as being significant trees because they're 20 feet tall. They're all the same species, Podocarpus or Afrocarpus gracilier, also known as fern pine. All trees are in fair condition, but are in competition with one another. Here's another image of the trees on the left side. Again, the health is, they're not in bad health. They're just kind of, they're planted very tightly. And then the 4 trees on the opposite side, on the east side of the driveway, again, they were all qualified as significant trees because they're 20 feet tall. And again, here's a picture of the trees on the right side as well. And it's hard to see, but the driveway does dive down very steeply, and that the driveway is going to be realigned and regraded. So the root systems will be affected, and the trees would not be able to remain given the planned construction at the site. As for tree planting afterwards, they're proposing to plant 2 new trees in the sidewalks, and then 3 new trees on private property, which will grow to become significant trees in the front yard. So, due to the net loss of significant trees. On top of planting the 5 trees, they're also going to be paying 6 tree in lieu fees at the end of construction. Thank you.
Do we have a representative from the construction project?
Yes, we have Mr. Leggett. Go ahead, Mr. Leggett.
Hi, this is Roy Leggett. I'm not technically I'm not the developer or the property owner. I'm the arborist. But I guess I'm probably the most appropriate representative to be here to talk about these trees. I think Mr. Keller was, well, I think he pretty accurately conveyed the issues with the podocarpus trees. They really are hedges. They're planted about, I guess, at an average about 3 feet apart, 2.5 to 3 feet apart, and on either side of the driveway. And they've just been allowed to grow up to become tall enough to be regulated. They're not big enough in diameter, and they don't have enough crown spread, but they're just tall and skinny, kind of packed in there. So there isn't really a canopy or a crown development on the trees, aside from the hedge type wall of green that they create. So they aren't growing or behaving like typical trees. The combined volume of canopy or crown created by the 8 regulated trees is probably equivalent to a single medium or moderate sized tree if it were a normal tree in a normal sidewalk setting. The beauty of putting new trees in at this site is that the sidewalk and with a front yard and the roadway and just kind of the full exposure of the site there, it's an ideal place to grow trees that will develop into well-balanced and normal canopies. There's lots of crown space available. We don't have and won't have after development a building sandwiched up against the back of the sidewalk like so much of San Francisco has. So there's going to be space for trees to grow in the round. And we're going to end up with different size trees. The street trees, I think, should be and are intended to be larger species. Because of the spacing, they'll probably be what Buff calls medium-sized trees. But the sidewalk is narrow, for instance. So we wouldn't want to put in large species, but medium-sized species can be the street trees. And then we have a site plan developed that shows 3 potential planting sites on private property that would be within 10 feet of the right-of-way. And those sites could be moved into different configurations, but there's room in the front yard to put in 3 more trees. And it's certainly acceptable for, one of the conditions to be that those trees must be planted and established and be regulated and protected as significant trees, even though they're new plantings. So then that would be compelling to, ensuring that they get watered and
30 seconds
survive this whole thing. So I have not discussed things like native species on this particular project with this particular property owner, but I suspect that would be acceptable as well if Mr. Keller thinks that native species might work out. It's a little bit exposed for kind of windy, but we might be able to get that to work. Thank you.
Okay, any members of the public?
Yes, we have Mr. Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so, you know, I think most of you on this call know that I've been coming to these pretty regularly for many years now. And what I never hear from a developer or a project sponsor, what I never hear is we were willing to try an alternate design that maybe didn't maximize square footage and our profit, but maybe did allow some of the existing ecology to continue to exist. What I never hear is we consider designs to save these trees, and why would they? Because I think my first point, it's not the most profitable thing to do. What I never hear from anyone from planning who doesn't show up to these hearings is we asked them to consider a design to save these trees. We pushed back. Why doesn't planning ever come to any of these removal hearings when apparently we're relying on what they approved? What I never hear from our Department of Public Works, we really pushed back. We went to planning. We asked planning and the developer if alternate designs had been considered. These are the things that I don't hear. And so what I do hear as an exhausted member of the public is this: development is our priority, not saving existing established trees, not going to bat for a pathetic 13% canopy that continues to decrease and does not have funding to increase. It's just project after project, development after development, driveways, streetlights, BART access, power vaults, fill in the blanks. Everything seems to be prioritized over preserving trees over and over again. It's exhausting and it's really frustrating as we look out into our world, people of good conscience who are intelligent, who know what's going on, that we just keep doing this piecemeal, not just hurting ourselves, but hurting everything that lives in the tiny canopy that we have and that relies on it, including ourselves. That's all I want to say about this.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. We have Mr. John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Good afternoon. I'm sort of here with the issue is there was really not, it was sort of left in the air of what type of species may go in if this project is approved and these permits are approved by Buff. And it just seems like, again, business as usual with Buff. You know, they get these projects and decide, well, you know, we could take out the trees and then we could put in new trees. But you're actually taking out more trees and putting in less. And it'll probably take a number of years before the canopy on this current site will get back to whatever what it currently is. Because me looking at the pictures, these trees are fully developed. I mean, at least the canopy wise, looking at them, you know. So I did you know, hear, you know, especially the three that possibly will go into the front yard within the 10 feet right away. I think that if this permit is approved, that that would be a condition that the significant trees would be more statured tree to put in, medium or large, because it's in the front yard, and that would be a condition of the permit. And then also because, you know, this is like business as usual. You know, they want to take out the trees and rebuild half their property. So they didn't consider any alternatives, and I didn't see that in the drawing. So it shows me the lack of consideration. And then Buff comes at the end of this. I don't know how long Buff has been on this project, but and it concurs with removal of all these trees. I find it deplorable that we're still removing so many trees, and they even call them hedges within San Francisco and in this neighborhood. So I find this sort of deplorable to hear the removal of these trees just for the development that somebody wants to upgrade their property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And we also have, yes, we have Mr. Michael Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
So this is Michael Nolte. you know, this my next comment relates to all four items that are on the agenda. We're now in a drought, and 15% usage has been requested by everybody in the state of California. So I hope this developer is willing to pay the fines that they will receive for the increased water usage they'll have to do to keep all these plants that they're planning on putting in as being required by these permits that they were seeking. You know, they can add that onto their improvement of their property. I just think it's, you know, like some of the other people that have already spoken, I think it's mind-boggling how many of these properties want to improve their property and the trees are just afterthoughts on what they're doing. And then people in the community as well as city departments have to come along and figure out their plans and understand what it is that they're doing and see if it can be possible. But, you know, we're still in the process of losing our trees. Regardless of how they can explain what they're doing, ultimately the community loses. It doesn't matter how a property owner wins, it's the community and their neighbors are losing, particularly the environment. There's an environmental loss. You know, these are trees that probably have some sort of developed that's, you know, development that's supporting the wildlife in the community, and that's going to be lost for a period of time. So anyway, and I'm kind of interested to see if there's actually any neighbors on the call. You know, when you have these kind of developments, I don't hear from the neighbors. So far, we haven't heard from any neighbors in all four items. I mean, except the first one, the one that was in the mission. So, you know, I think it's important to hear from the neighbors also. What you know, did the developer actually do any outreach to the neighbors about these permits? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. Ms. Park, I don't see any other hands regarding this issue.
Okay. Mr. Keller, do you have any comment back?
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with the public in the fact that when trees are located on private property, that they often get their way in terms of the Bureau of Urban Forestry approving them. We do work with planning and DBI and applicants on many occasions trying to preserve trees. And often the public does not see that because the trees never get approved for removal. So I guess obviously tree hearings are a very biased interaction with the public and the fact that it's all about tree removal. So it seems like we're constantly just approving trees to be removed everywhere, but we are often denying trees, and we're telling applicants don't even attempt to apply to remove for that tree because we're going to deny it. So there is a lot that goes behind the scenes in terms of not allowing tree removal, trying to tell them it will be a difficult process, but some, you know, but often, you know, an applicant has a design and, you know, which cannot preserve trees, and then we feel that the tree planting they're offering, you know, is enough to mitigate the loss. So that's a, you know, I guess that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this subject? Okay. Sherry, you, Mr. Wolf wanted to add a comment for 24th Street.
Yes, he did. Mr. Wolf, you should be able to unmute. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to just take another moment to revisit the 24th Street issue. I wanted to tie together, if I could, the first three items. We talked about BART needing access to an already existing infrastructure to further develop public transit. We spoke about the SFMTA needing to create an emergency exit for their vehicles. If you compare those two projects with the 24th Street one, the 24th Street is a private development. It is not about the public safety or transportation needs of the city. There is a very large difference here. And that is, first, private development versus public good. And secondly, an agreement that exists between Buff and the community that protects these two trees in question. So if these permits go forward, we will not be only losing these two particular trees, we will be losing the faith and participation even of an entire community that has spent so much time and has garnered so much support for the trees in its own neighborhood. And this is something profound and should be avoided at all costs, because how can you expect a community to work with you when you willingly abrogate the agreement that you make with it? Please think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's all the items on the agenda for today. Is there anybody else that wants to comment on any of the items? Go ahead.
I would just say that given the hearing did start the 1 minute late, so if anyone did have access issues, we should give a couple days for members of the public who maybe were unable to attend or gave up, that they can contact the Bureau of Urban Forestry to submit more more opinions or written appeals, and then we'll forward that to the hearing officer, just in the off chance that did happen, even though it was a very short delay.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. I will be on the lookout for those before I make the recommendations. Anyone else? Okay, if there are no other public comments or anybody else that needs to speak, I will be closing this meeting or this hearing. Three? Okay, this hearing is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Cerise, can you hit the stop record button?